Hello, I'm Ben Barber with the Institute for Southern Studies, and today I'm joined by Representative Zakiya Summers, who serves in the Mississippi House of Representatives, representing the 68th District. And today we'll be discussing a new bill that Representative Summers is co-sponsoring to really expand voter protections in the state, as well as the broader fight to protect democracy across the South. Representative Summers, we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And so, I really want to just start off with a little bit of context about the Robert G. Clark Jr. Voting Rights Act, which is the bill that you introduced and co-sponsored. Can you just tell us a little bit about what inspired this effort and why it was important to push from the state level rather than wait on federal action?
Absolutely. We are anticipating a decision that will come from the Supreme Court on a case that's been brought out of Louisiana. What's at stake is a continued effort to gut the Federal Voting Rights Act by removing Section 2, which helps to protect Black voters from racial discrimination in election maps. And so we know that the Supreme Court has been leaning very conservatively. We do remain optimistic and hopeful that they won't do what we think they might do. And so as a result of that, we wanted to be proactive in our approach to this. And we've been working with a coalition of civic engagement organizations, primarily Fair Fight, One Voice, and others, to put forward the Robert G. Clark Jr. Voting Rights Act. And what this legislation would do is to provide state level protections as it relates to voting rights. We didn't want to continue to wait on the federal government to do what it needed to do to continue to protect those rights through the federal legislation. And so we wanted to have a vehicle to say that Mississippi will stand on the right side of history should a decision come down that would remove those protections. And we wanted to do that with this particular piece of legislation. And the reason why we named it the Robert G. Clark Voting Rights Act is because Robert G. Clark was the first African American elected to the Mississippi legislature after Reconstruction. We have not had an African American to win statewide office since Reconstruction. And when he came into the legislature, the first time that he voted, which was in 1967, he voted for himself. And so this is such a prominent piece of legislation that we wanted to name it after a prominent person. So we introduced that bill.
No, thank you. And you touched on the because really since 2013 we've seen the erosion of the Voting Rights Act, the federal piece of legislation, and Mississippi has a long history of voter suppression and passing laws that really undermine voting rights, especially for Black voters. Can you just talk about the significance of pushing this particular piece of legislation in a state with that type of history, and also as for with the history of in the South as well? I think Virginia is the only other Southern state has kind of moved forward with this type of specific legislation. These state moves to protect voting rights. Could you just talk about the significance of it of doing it in Mississippi with the
Yeah,
long history?
yeah, you're absolutely right. So in 2013, we had the Shelby v. Holder decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act through Section 5. And following that decision, we began to see legislatures and secretaries of state push forward various tactics of voter suppression. Even here in the state of Mississippi, right away, we implemented voter ID. And when we talk about voting rights, you can't leave out Mississippi. Mississippi has been at the forefront of the voting rights fight, forever. I think about Freedom Summer of 1964 and the individuals that, had so many sacrifices and really risked it all just for us to be able to participate in our political process. And so it was befitting, for Mississippi to come forward with this piece of legislation with the understanding of the prominent history that we've had as it relates to voting rights. And, we see this as an opportunity for us to continue to protect voters here in Mississippi. Oftentimes Mississippi gets a bad rap, and for good reason. I mean, we have implemented voter suppression tactics, and we've made it very hard for people to vote over the years. I mean, the statement that I made in the onset around us not having a statewide, not having an African American to win a statewide election speaks volumes to the fact that Mississippi has made it very difficult for people to vote. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were doing our part to come forward with something that will provide those state level voting rights protections so that we can continue to protect our voters here in the great state of Mississippi.
And you mentioned a little earlier too, just about the importance of these type of protections for Black voters in specific. And as we're continuing to learn more and more, Black voters are like a crucial voting bloc in the South, but they have not always been fully appreciated by political establishment, by the political establishment. But so, what do you see as like some common misconceptions about Mississippi's Black voters and just Black voters across the South as well?
Absolutely. So Black Mississippians, they say, make up about 37, 38% of the population. I actually think it's more like 40%. That's a huge block of voters that can determine the future of our state. And we see these pockets of strong Black population across the South. And we say, as Mississippi goes, so goes the rest of the nation. And as the South goes, so goes the rest of the nation, because of the things that we've been able to fight for and put in place, like the Civil Rights Act, like the Voting Rights Act, that has not only helped to support Black representation in the South, but has actually helped all of the American electorate in making sure that they have unfettered access to the ballot box. A lot of times we are, discounted for the voting power that we have, because we're able to elect the people that represent our best interests. And when we have those kinds of representation, particularly at the policy-making table, we see progressive legislation that not only helps Black folks, but helps everybody. We're putting forward pieces of legislation that are rooted in justice and equity. And that's really what this bill is about. I mean, we talk a lot about Black voters, and we know that the Voting Rights Act primarily was designed to protect Black voters. But when we talk about state level voting rights protections, we're talking about everyone. So we're talking about folks that may have English language issues. We're talking about disabled voters. We're talking about elderly voters, rural voters, and making sure that they're able to elect those folks that best represent them and can bring their concerns to the table.
No, thank you for that. And I know you mentioned earlier as well, like just this specific effort about Mississippi's this push for a Mississippi State Voting Rights Act has been kind of like a combination of elected officials and both grassroots organizations. Can you just talk about the importance of that relationship, just the relationship between elected politics, but also people on the ground and civic organizations kind of pushing these type of efforts as well?
Absolutely. Well, history teaches us that the gains that we have made have come from the bottom up. They've come from grassroots efforts. They've come from civic organizations, the NAACP, the ACLU, that have worked to organize communities and get those communities to be involved in a tremendous call to action, and to help bring elected officials to task to address the issues that they're experiencing within their communities. And I think it's a win-win situation when you can have the community behind elected officials working along, I shouldn't say behind, I should actually say working alongside elected officials, because then you're meeting the moment in a way where everyone benefits. And so when we're able to go into community or go into our districts and talk with constituents about issues like this surrounding voting rights, and we have the support of civic engagement, not only does it help to make the legislation stronger, but it also helps to empower voters so that they can help us in carrying the message, in gaining more support, in calling our colleagues across the aisle, and help raise attention with them about the impacts of this legislation, and more importantly, what we can do, particularly during session, to ensure that we are making sure that the folks that we represent have equal access to the ballot box. The way that we make democracy strong in the state of Mississippi is by educating voters, it's by engaging them, it's by showing them what's at risk, but also what are the opportunities. And so our grassroots organizations and our civic engagement partners help us in that effort. And it's really a show of solidarity that we're all on the same page and singing from the same sheet of hymn music, so to speak, and making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do so that we can continue to grow our voting power in the state of Mississippi, and that we are helping to protect and expand our democracy.
And this year is such a crucial midterm election, and we've already
Yes,
seen,
sir.
yeah, we already seen just a onslaught of attacks on voter protections, which as we go, this has been a pattern in southern states, of course, but with that in mind, like, what advice would you give to state lawmakers or advocates in other southern states who are trying to counter these restrictive voting policies while also pushing measures that would help expand the right to vote?
Yeah. It's tough in this environment. I mean, we are battling against an administration that is really making life harder for everyday citizens and trying to do all that they can to roll back the rights and the gains that we've made over the last several decades. And then when you layer that with state legislatures that are, super majority Republican legislators, they are conservatively run, it does become a little bit overwhelming. But I just want to encourage legislators that we're the ones that we've been waiting for. We're the ones in this moment in time, and we're going to have to be very clear, and there may be some sacrifices that we have to make. But it's on us now to begin to push those measures and to begin to push the very prominent and important legislation that does not roll back time. Because what I'm very concerned about is that if we do not protect voting rights of black voters, which are primarily throughout the South, and they're able to create an opportunity for some type of constitutional convention, because they only need 34 states to do it, we could have we could be setting ourselves up for a time that we've never seen before. And so we've got to be serious, because the work that we're doing right now is necessary, not just for today, but for the future. I'll tell you a really quick story. I never met my great grandmother. She lived in a very rural area of the state. And it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed that she was able to vote. And she would, the country folks say we had to walk in town. She would have to walk in town 5 miles to be able to vote. And along the way, she would tell her neighbors, which were, acres away from where she lived, because she lived in a very rural area. And then she would walk 5 miles back home. And she never missed an election. Now, check this out. That was back in the 60s. We think that was ancient history. That was only about 60 years ago. But now, because of the fruits of her labor and the fruits of so many that have labored for years and risked it all, that I have an opportunity to sit in a seat here at the state capitol that used to be run by people that said that we would never be able to hold these seats. Even when Mr. Clark came into the legislature, they were so upset that he had won his election that they sawed his desk in half and set him in the front so that nobody else would sit with him. And we even have that desk on the House chamber floor at this point in time. And so I just say all that to say that we got to remain persistent. We've got to stand together, unified. Whatever issues, personal issues we have with each other, we got to leave that at the door, because what we're up against is an element that does not want us to have any kind of representation, that doesn't want us to have access to health care and access to education and access to voting, so that we can have political power. And we know that our economic power is rooted in our political power. And so, we have to continue to fight the power, as they used to say, and give the people what they want, to ensure that we're doing all that we can for today and also for tomorrow, and for the generations unborn that we don't know, because they're depending on us to meet the moment in history and do what's right and stand on the right side of history, not the wrong side of history.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for that. And just one more final question, like, could you just, talk about if there are any next steps for this particular piece of legislation, and really just, what's your hope for the future of democracy and voting rights in Mississippi? And I'll give you the floor.
Yeah. Well, regrettably, this bill did meet its demise in committee. And to be totally transparent, we anticipated that, because of the makeup of our legislature and just the political atmosphere that we're in right now. It's because of the voting rights that we've been able to make marginal gains, but important gains nevertheless in the legislature. Just recently, we disrupted the supermajority in the Senate because of the Voting Rights Act, right? And so, even though the bill has died, our desire and our work to continue to protect voting rights has not died and will not die. And we'll continue to use this as a tool and as a mechanism to raise awareness, to educate folks about what's happening, to help strengthen our efforts, so that when we come back next session and we have more time to lobby it, hopefully we can see some movement on this particular piece of legislation. And then my hope for the future of democracy in Mississippi and in this country is that we are able to continue to make it work. We have a birthright citizenship in this country that gives us unfettered access to the ballot box. And yet we see efforts in Mississippi and across the country to continue to make it harder for people to vote. We've been dealing with disenfranchisement laws ever since the 1890 state constitution. And it seems like the closer we get to changing that, it becomes even more difficult for us to finally get it out of committee or even across the finish line at the end of the session. And so our democracy is our form of government. But if we are not participating in it, if we are allowing the couch to take our vote, then we're not making democracy work. And so, I would love to be able to see one day a woman become the president of the United States of America. I would love to see another person from a community of color to be able to hold the highest office. I would even love to see someone here in the state of Mississippi become the governor one day. That's how we continue to make democracy strong, and we continue to make it work. And so I know things seem a little tense, but I believe in the future of America, and I believe in democracy. And I don't believe that we are going to allow the fabric of our democracy to be unraveled. And the way that we do that is that we participate, we become engaged, we work with our elected officials, folks like me and my colleagues that are within the Black Caucus, to continue to press the needle forward. And we have to build pressure on the inside and on the outside. And we've seen that when we do that, when we work together, we can help change history.
Thank you so much. I think that's a good place to wrap. We appreciate it, Representative Summers.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation.